Okay.
Awesome. That's awesome. Sorry, I'm going to tilt this down a little bit because. All right. Ooh, don't want to do that. There we go. Can you all hear me online?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. So I'm so delighted to be here today. I want to start this talk by kind of giving you some background because I think it's important that you know who I am and why I'm even talking to you about this. Okay, so I'm the single mother of 3 sons, and I have a daughter-in-law now. I raised my boys from the time my oldest was 5 and my youngest was 3 months by myself. Sorry, I'm getting the hang of this. There's me with my 3 sons at my middle son's graduation from UC Santa Cruz. I'm the grandmother just this past July of Zoe. We just had our first grandbaby. This is Zoe. And she is the absolute delight of my life. I love spending time with her. She's just perfect. I'm the pet parent to 3 dogs. There's a 2. And then this is my new puppy named Jessamy, and 1 cat. I've been a high school English teacher for the last 29 years. I teach at Elk Grove High School in Elk Grove, California, and I've been there the entire time of my career for the whole 29 years. I'm hoping to retire in a year. I think if you do anything for 30 years, you should get a chance to do something new. And I'd really like to spend more time concentrating on this crazy writing business. I am the author of more than 65 books. I just published a book on Kindle Vella, and it will be coming out as a novella at the end of October. That's also, it's a mystery, and I can talk more about that in a bit. But so I've done a bit of publishing. This is my website, and it's where I list all of my books, and I can talk more about that too because I switched genres, and a lot of times people will make multiple websites for whatever genre they're making. And I would venture that that's probably not in your best interest if you are going to switch genres. I am currently the president of NCPA. That's the writing group that's also one of your sister writing groups. And I am the manager of the California State Fair Authors Booth. We have a booth every summer, every time the fair happens, which we were gone for obviously the COVID years. And we run 7 authors a day through the booth, up to 40 authors usually. I also do some editing. I started my own editing service called Black Cat Editing because I didn't have enough to do. Just as Gloria said, in 2010, I made my first New Year's resolution. I was just telling Gloria a little while ago, I was terrified to share my writing with anybody. And I had this wealth of stuff that I had written that was just sitting that nobody saw. I was afraid to show anybody. And I'm sure that some of you probably can relate to that. And I didn't have a whole lot of confidence in my ability. I didn't feel like I was very good at it. So I made a New Year's resolution in 2010. I said, it's a new decade. And I need to do something about this whole writing dream that I have. And at the time I had joined, Del Rey was a publisher, used to be, of science fiction and fantasy. And they had a writing group that they were doing online. It's like one of the first online writing groups. And they were, people would upload their chapters and other people would critique it. And once in a while, Del Rey would pull one of these books and they would actually publish it. And so everybody, of course, on there thought they were going to be published. So I started putting my stuff up and I was getting good feedback. I was getting good responses. And so I thought, well, maybe there is something here. And so I started submitting in 2010 to agents. And as I was submitting to agents, I kept getting rejection letters. In fact, I could probably wallpaper my whole house with the rejection letters I received from agents. So somebody on Arthonomy, that was the name of the writing group, said, why don't you just apply to this new publishing house that's just opening up called Wild Wolf Publications in England.
Mhm.
And they were a group of men who wanted to get into the publishing business, and they were very ambitious, and they started a publishing company. And so I submitted my query letter, and I got back, send us the first chapter. And then I got back, send us the full manuscript. And then they went forward and they published my first novel, which was a fantasy called, at the time, it was called Emerald. And I was with them for probably, well, I was with them for 5 years. So we went forward and they published 5 of my fantasy novels. And it was a great relationship in the fact that they taught me so much about the business. I didn't know anything. I was just completely, a babe in the woods. And they taught me a lot about cover design and about sending out, galleys and stuff like that. And so I learned a lot from them. But after 5 years, it started becoming really difficult working when we were so far away from each other. And the time difference was a big problem. And also the time difference throughout the year was a problem, because when I would have time off from teaching, they would be on holiday. And so they wouldn't want to do anything. And then when I go back to teaching, they'd be like, I need this tomorrow. And I couldn't do it. And so it became very difficult to keep working in that kind of environment. But I had done something really stupid. And this is something that I really, really try and caution everybody against doing. I had sold them the rights to my world. And I didn't realize that. And I had also given right of first refusal. And what that means is they had the right to publish anything in that world. They had the right to see anything that was published under that world first and decide whether they wanted to publish it or not. And they kept saying yes. And I had no legal rights to get that world back. So that's part of the reason why I switched genres. And I'll get to that in a second. So I want to talk about, because that was my first start. So 5 years I was with Wild Wolf, and I published 5 books with them that were all epic fantasies under that World of Samar umbrella. I built quite an audience in England with the fantasies. They're very, fantasy is a huge genre in England, especially. And so I had quite a fairly set audience in England, and I had some people that were sort of coming into reading it in the US by the time I finally left the publisher. But by far my audience in England was much larger. And of course that was where they were most comfortable promoting my book. And so that's what they mostly did, was in that market in England. So this is the first, this was Emerald. This was their cover of Emerald. These are the ones that they published after. And these were all their covers. So they designed those covers. They had the rights to those covers. And when I wanted to go independent, everyone in my family told me, just go and do a different genre. Don't try and get the rights back, because I had no legal rights to it. However, I decided it was just so hard for me, because these had been works that I had spent so many years writing. I didn't want to just give it up. It was pretty hard for me just to say, yeah, I've lost that. It's not mine anymore. So I did contact them, and I said, I'd like to have back the rights to my world and to the books, to be able to go back in and republish them as a second edition on my own. And they were very honest and good people. And they said, yes, you can have your rights back. And I was even prepared to pay something for the rights back, but they just gave them, they reversed all the rights, and they had no reason to do that. They didn't have to, but they were very honest people, and they reversed all the rights to me. So then I went forward. I had to get new covers for all the novels, but I republished them on my own independently. Did you have a question, Chris? Yeah. So that's what I'm getting to next. So when you're talking about fantasy, so characteristics of epic fantasy is that there's usually a large world building. You have your own laws, your own science, your own whatever. And so you create this large world. If you think of a video game, you know, they'll have that whole world. They'll have a map. Usually you see a map. You'll have, and mine took place on a different planet. My premise was that humans had gone in a spaceship to try and find a new planet to inhabit. They found this planet, but things went wrong. And so they wound up being very primitive and going back into very primitive feudal kind of society. And so that whole world, that idea, the world of Samar, that's what I called my place, they bought that. So when they buy that world, when they buy your premise, you can't write, or anybody can't write anything under that title unless they approve it. So that's the problem with selling them your world. You could sell them your novel, but then you could write other novels, right, under that world, because you own the world, where they had the rights to the world. I don't know if I explained. Yes, yes. And I was naive, and I was hungry, and I wanted to be published so bad. And I was very insecure in the sense that I didn't feel like anybody would be interested in what I wrote. And so I was willing to sell it because I just wanted to be published, you know, and that was the mistake I made. So regarding the characteristics of an epic fantasy, again, it's that large world building. So you create your world, you create the laws of your world, however that's going to be. If it has a magic system, you have to create all of that. Whatever the government is, you have to create all of that. Who are the humans or humanoids or whatever that populate that world? You create all of that. Usually there's a large cast of characters because there just seems to be, because the idea is that you're creating this world, you have to populate it. For me, I decided to do multiple generations. So each one of the novels, well, not each one. So the first novel is one generation, the second novel is a new generation. And then I had a trilogy of a third generation. So usually I have multiple generations. Think of Game of Thrones. There has to be some sort of magic source. I have never really been all that comfortable with just waving a wand and ta-da, magic appears. That's my own hang up on it. So I wanted something. So it was actually my father who came up with my magic source for my books. And he decided that it would be, that there would be these special gems that were on the planet that caused these mutations in their DNA. And they had abilities that developed off of those gems, that created these mutations. So that was my magic source. So you have to have some sort of a magic source, usually. And then usually it follows the hero's journey. So almost always you have that hero's journey of taking your character through sort of that quest, if you will. Come on, advance. Oh, here we go. I want to talk a little bit about the hero's journey. So there's many parts to the hero's journey. You can see kind of the diagram there. But what are those parts for a hero's journey? And again, this is for epic fantasy, but a lot of fantasy also follows that hero's journey. You have the call to adventure. Usually the hero is in a mundane situation. They're in their hometown. They're in, you know, a very nondescript kind of place, and they get this call to adventure. And whether that's somebody coming to them and telling them that you need to go on this adventure, or something happens. In mine, the hero, his entire town is wiped out. And so that forces him to take action. So you have that call to adventure. Then there's always the refusal of the call. Nope, I don't want to go. I'm just a simple farm boy. I don't want to, you know, take on this quest. And so there always has to be this refusal to address the call. Then usually a mentor comes in. Usually it's an older person who comes in and says, no, you have to do this. This is something that you have to do. And for mine, I'm not going to give away the thing, but he's a very important person to my hero's life that he didn't even realize was important to him. That comes in to force him to go on the journey. There's always the adventure, the ordeal, and then there's usually some sort of reward that they get at the end. It typically is something wonderful. Maybe they discover a treasure, maybe they save the girl, they save the princess or whatever. But often in modern fantasy, they actually lose something significant and they come away less whole than they were prior to going on the quest. And then there's the road back. And that's how they come back to some semblance of what their lives were before. Can they relive their life? Can they pick up where they left off, or are they too damaged to pick up, or do they need to go into a different, future that they didn't anticipate when they were first starting on the hero's journey? And then finally is the resurrection. And now that can be anything. It could be that, they move on to a different point in their lives. It could be that they pass the torch on to the next generation, which often happens in my books, is that gets moved on to the next generation. And so that's sort of that idea of resurrection, is that coming back to some semblance of who they were at the start with all this new knowledge. So that's kind of what the hero's journey is, to kind of give you an idea that if you think about the Harry Potter, you could probably walk through that. If you think about Lord of the Rings, obviously it follows directly down the hero's journey.
Jennifer?
So after I had been with Wild Wolf for 5 years, like I said, I decided to venture into self-publishing. I felt confident. I was getting good reviews. People seemed to be enjoying what I wrote. I felt like I had something and I could move forward. Some reasons why I felt confident was I had 5 years of having that safety net, of having a publisher kind of back me up. They paid for the cover design. They paid for the formatting. They paid for the galleys that went out. They did all of that. They did the marketing, what marketing they did, and I didn't have to do any of that. So I had that safety net behind me, but I had learned quite a bit about how you go about doing all of that stuff. The other thing that had happened is as I said, I had built up an audience. I had a fairly large audience in England, and I felt pretty secure in moving forward. And I really wanted to obviously get more into a bigger market like the US, which is a huge market. I also wanted to venture into a different genre. And what I mainly wanted to do was I really wanted to write modern dialogue. I love dialogue. I love character development. And I wanted to kind of come out of the stilted epic fantasy dialogue, and I wanted to write more modern dialogue and be a little bit more, in tune with what was happening in current events. But what really put me on the path was I had one dark spark of inspiration, because I was playing around with a friend of mine. We were both in Arthonomy together. We were on the online writing group, and she contacted me one day and she said, I have a project for us. We're going to do this over the summer. We're going to both write a romance, because romance is the largest genre. We're going to write this romance and we're going to just, knock it out of the park. And we're going to do this. So this is the challenge. So I said, okay, I like a challenge. I'll do that. I'll write a romance. I get halfway through the romance and I realized, no, I can't write a romance. Could not do it. It is harder than what you think it is, right? I thought it was going to be easy peasy lemon squeezy, and it wasn't. It was much harder than that. And I wasn't comfortable with writing sex scenes, and I sure didn't want my sons or my students to find that I had written something like that. So and I noticed that as I was writing it, what I got more interested in was kind of this mystery that was sort of kind of developing in the romance. And it turned out after I got done that I didn't have a romance. I actually had a mystery novel, even though nobody died. It wasn't a murder mystery, but I had a mystery novel. And she never even did it. She didn't even get out of the gate. And so I thought, okay, so that was kind of interesting. I didn't know how that went in that direction. And then my mother's cousin suddenly died. And she died in the hospital. So if you die in the hospital, you don't have to have an autopsy. There was nothing wrong with her. Nobody knew that she was even sick, and she just died. And her husband opted not to have an autopsy. But the other weird thing that happened was he opted to have her cremated before her children could even get to California, like literally died cremated within a day before her children could come back to California to say goodbye. And so got me thinking, like, how does that happen? And why would that happen? And so I had this horrible idea of like, how could you kill somebody and not have anybody know how it happened? And so that sparked my idea to write a murder mystery. So I decided to write my first murder mystery. And unfortunately, I made every mistake you could possibly make. And I'll talk about some of those mistakes because hopefully nobody else will make them. But murder mystery is the most popular genre next to romance. It's the biggest one, biggest seller next to romance. So the bad news about that is now I'm swimming upstream against the current, right? Because there's so many murder mysteries out there. There's so many mysteries out there that now I've got to find my way in. What's my way into a mystery that's already a genre that's already saturated? And that concerned me. But I was determined to go ahead and try it. What's life if you don't try it? I've talked about both of those. So my first murder mystery, Murder on Potrero Hill, was published in 2013. So I grew up just outside of San Francisco in Pacifica. And so San Francisco was, a major influence in my life. My whole life, San Francisco was a major influence. And so when I got to where I was going to set the murder mystery, I thought, where am I going to set it? Well, what do I know better than San Francisco? And I hit on something unknowingly, because San Francisco is so iconic. It automatically kind of elevated me in the genre, because every place that I wrote about, people knew. It wasn't unfamiliar, because so many people know San Francisco. That wasn't unfamiliar. The mistake I made, though, is the first time I put it out there, I called it Potrero Hill. I didn't put the murder on there. So everybody thought it was a travel log for Potrero Hill. And they're like, why in the world are you giving us a 300-page book on Potrero Hill, which is a relatively small neighborhood in San Francisco? So at that point, I hired a cover designer, and I said, this is selling as a travel log. And she's like, well, first of all, I have no idea what the genre is, because you don't have it anywhere on there. And I don't know. Beyond that, I mean, it doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't have any kind of a vibe to me of a murder mystery. And so her idea was, we got to make sure people know what it is. So we're going to put murder in red right across the top. And then we're going to hit this black and white theme and make it seem, with the clouds and everything, make it seem really kind of dark and spooky. Yeah. The recover I had to, oh, no, I didn't. No, it literally had the picture of the house, and then that was it. And it just said Potrero Hill. So no, it didn't give away anything. And her thing was, and I'm a total convert on this, is that you have to have branding. You have to have branding across the series. So it looks, you need to have branding as an author. You need to have branding across the series so that it's obvious that this is part of a series. And picking up on the San Francisco theme, I just went with that. So all my branding has to do with San Francisco. Most of my writing takes place in San Francisco now. And like I said, that I think that is part of why I got a foot in the door in the mystery genre, just because I kind of stumbled on some things that lent themselves well to people remembering. I've had people come up and say, you know, are you that San Francisco author? So they'll remember something like that where they may not remember my name. So I want to talk about the characteristics of a mystery in general. There's usually a complex plot. So I don't know how many of you are pantsers, or is anybody in here a pantser writing? You're a pantser. I admire you. I don't know how you do it. A pantser is somebody who writes it by the seat of their pants, and a plotter, obviously, yeah. And a plotter is somebody who plots everything out. Well, I don't know. I've had people tell me, no, I'm a plotter. I'm a pantser, and I write mysteries. I don't know how you do that, because you have to have this very complex plot, and you have to sprinkle your clues around throughout the plot. So I don't know how you do that without plotting it out, at least knowing exactly where the clues are going to come. I mean, in that regard. So a mystery usually has a very complex plot. There's usually a murder of some kind. There has to be a crime, obviously, and a criminal. And then research. Now, this has become much easier, although I fear sometimes, like when I'm writing, I'll have, 20 or so windows open as I'm doing my research. And sometimes I fear that the FBI may come one day and knock on my door. They may think that I have an unhealthy fascination with Ted Kaczynski, for one, because I've looked up an awful lot about him. And so I worry a little bit, but that someday, I'm going to get the knock on the door and the FBI is going to be like, what are you doing? And I'm going to say, mystery writer. But so it requires a lot of research. Let me go back. And so even in my fantasies, I'm not fond of the big bad. Do you know what I mean when I say the big bad, where there's this main evil character and they're just evil for the sake of being evil and you don't know what their motivation is? I like a character that has like a big bad. If there's going to be a big bad, that maybe is a little bit more subtle about why they're evil, or they might have a reason why they're evil. It may not be a good reason, but at least there's a reason why they're evil. I was the same way with when I was writing the fantasies. I don't really like, just the I want domination over the world. To me, that's not a great motivator. So I like them to have some kind of motivation. So recently with the murder mysteries, I've kind of run out of ideas of how to kill people. I know that sounds horrible, but the FBI has a database where they have a bunch of cases that they've solved that you can go and you can look and you can get all the information about real cases and you can use them, or there's all the true murder podcasts and stuff like that. You can get your research, a lot of research through that. And that way, a lot of the cases that I do now are real cases. I've just fictionalized them and put them in my world and, taken whatever liberties I need to take to make the plot kind of fit. And I've kind of tracked more towards social justice kind of stuff, just because that's kind of what's interesting me now. So, if you think I could write a mystery, but I'm not really into murder, hopefully you're not, there's ways that you can kind of get around that and find out real information about terrible things people do. There is another genre, if you're familiar with, called cozy mysteries, and I kind of ventured into that. Sometimes when I'm writing the murder mysteries, it's a dark place to go to. for myself as a writer, and I need a palate cleanser. And so I'll go over and I'll write one of the cozy mysteries. Now, cozy mystery, usually the murder happens off scene. It usually takes place in a small town. I think Murder, She Wrote, Angela Lansbury, may you rest in peace. That's what a cozy mystery generally is. It's usually a layperson who solves the mystery, and usually the violence is much more toned down. So I'll go and I'll write one of those to kind of get out of that whole serial killer kind of vibe that you can get into when you're writing murder mysteries. So that's one thing I would warn you, is that it can be a dark place to go to. So the benefits of switching genres, because a lot of times you'll hear people say, whatever you started writing, you need to stick with that and don't switch it. I disagree. I think that in order to be true to yourself as an artist, you need to write what you want to write, right? And if it means that you're going to switch genres because you want to try something different, I say go for it. Some of the benefits of it is you might reach a new audience that you hadn't realized that you could reach before. I have so many people who read my murder mysteries who have ventured into fantasy, and they said, I've never read fantasy before, but because it was yours, I'd go ahead and give it a try. And so you might be opening people up to a new genre that they didn't even realize that they enjoyed. And you might reach a new audience. It hones your skill. I have to be honest, changing and writing something different really forces me to take a look at my craft and what I'm doing and how, because if you can imagine writing an epic fantasy, I've got a very different tone and feeling than I do when I'm writing a murder mystery set in modern times. And so it teaches me kind of how to manipulate the craft in multiple ways and to be able to write in different genres. It's the avoiding being the one trick pony. There's so many people, you know, that they write that one novel and then they're done. This allows you to kind of try out, maybe you started as one genre and you've had some success, but you went and you switched to a different genre. You may find all of a sudden it just unlocks something. And you might find that maybe that's a better fit for you, even though you didn't think it was.
Mm-hmm.
So some difficulties about it and some things that I would warn you to be careful of. You may lose some readers in the sense that they don't want to make that switch. So you have to be aware that may be a casualty. Although I haven't really noticed that, to be honest with you. I've like I said, I have a lot of people who've told me, I picked up one of your, I do write some urban fantasy once in a while. I picked up one of your urban fantasy novels because I ran out of things to read. You might build, building a new audience can be difficult. So you need to find that hook to kind of wedge your way in. So that's where I'm telling you, you might take a look. What is if you're going to move into another genre, what is going to be that branding that you're going to do? Yeah. Urban fantasy is magical things kind of happen in an urban setting during modern times. Yeah. So in mine, the one I just finished, she is a psychiatrist at San Quentin. And she's coming back into the city from San Quentin. If you know anything about where San Quentin is, it's over in the Marin side. And she's coming across the bridge and she gets back into the city and she gets T-boned with her car. And she wakes up in the hospital and this man is standing over her bed and he asks her if she wants to live. And she says yes. And then she thinks he uses this medallion he's got to do something to her, and she suddenly realized she's got all these strange things are happening. She can see in the dark, her eyes glow in the dark. She can what is her powers? I'm totally blanked on what her powers are, but she meets another man. He's super quick, he can run super fast, and they find out gradually over time that their DNA was altered. And he injected them with something to alter their DNA, and it caused this enhanced ability. to do these things. So that's what urban fantasy, usually it's set in a modern setting. The other thing is splitting resources, and this is where I would caution you. A lot of people will say, well, I need to have a website for my fantasy, and then I need to have a website for my mystery or whatever it is. When you do that, now you're splitting your resources. So now you have to have money, right, to go in both those places. Where if you just keep it all within one, under you as the author, instead of having a website for the genre, for the whatever series you're writing, you have you as the author. That's your website, is for you. Then you can break it into pages and separate it out instead of trying to maintain two separate sites. And then keeping everything straight. I take copious notes, so it's making sure, I'm sure anybody who writes does this, but it's making sure you have all the notes, because if you're, especially if you're writing series and you're skipping from, which is what I do, I skip from one series to the next. So I'll write one in this series, and I'll write one of the cozy mysteries, and then I'll write, you know, something else. It can get a little confusing to go back. So you may have to go back, you may have to reread the previous title. I like to listen to the audiobook. I have a really good audiobook producer, and I've learned that I learn much better hearing than I do reading. So I listen to the audiobook before I go to write the next one in that series. But it's just keeping everything straight. So you have to either be a copious note taker, or you have to have some other method that you can kind of remind yourself of what's going on in that series versus this one. And then this is the big problem. My most popular series is my murder mystery series, the Peyton Brooks murder mysteries. And people will read the book, and then they'll send me an email the next day. The book literally released, it went live one day. The next day I get an email, when's the next one coming out? I can't write as fast as you can read. There's just no way that's going to happen. And so that's the problem, is that you got to always somehow try and stay in their mind, which is why I have a newsletter. And if you do not have a newsletter, I would strongly recommend you start cultivating a newsletter, because it is vitally important, because they're the people that you go to first. You send out your newsletter to announce the next book, and they're the ones that read. They're your most reliable readers. Yes. Yeah, so if you were to go onto my website right now, I'd have a pop-up that comes up and asks you if you want to sign up for my newsletter. You can exit out of it, you don't have to, but it comes right up, so it's the first thing you'll see. It only stays up for like 5 or 10 seconds, but that has been huge. I went from getting 4 or 5 people. I had a dedicated page where they could sign up for the newsletter on my website. I was getting 4 or 5 people, and then I set up the pop-up, and it went from 4 or 5 to 30 to 50 every single month. So I've tripled my newsletter size in the last 6 months. No. I use MailerLite is the newsletter service that I do, and I do one newsletter a month, and I send it out the first of the month, and it goes to their emails. Yeah.
But when you talk about it,
So usually I have a template that I have set up, and what I do is I just update the template. So I have a base so that they see the same thing. I think routine is not bad for all of us, right? And so I think sometimes if you see the same thing, but it's not the same content. So I have it set up the same way, and then I change out the content. So if we have a new audiobook coming out, I'll advertise the new audiobook we have coming out. I usually try and include some anecdotes. So I often will tell them a story about something that happened while I was writing the latest novel. So a lot of times I'll write a scene, like when I was writing the first murder mystery series, my sons and I, we would go back to San Francisco. One of my sons lives there, but we would go and we would walk the neighborhood. And so there was always something that happened when we were doing Potrero Hill. We went to Potrero Hill. Potrero Hill has it's been very much gentrified, and it has a community garden. They have a community garden that the whole neighborhood goes and they work in. And so while we were there, we're walking around Potrero Hill and we come by this community garden and they're all working in there and they're working in the community. The neighbors are working in the community garden, and this woman pulls up in a car and she lifts the back hatchback of the car and she says, "Come and get pizza. I brought the pizza." And all the people come out and they go and they have pizza. My sons were like, "Can we go get pizza?" I was like, "No, you can't go get pizza. You don't live here." But I wrote that into the book. And so then I'll tell that story of us going. And then another time we went to Chinatown and my sons got very interested in the phallic totems that were in Chinatown. And so I wrote that, you know, so anything like that that comes up during the writing of the book, I write some anecdote and then I advertise the next book. I always run a contest on my website every month for people to get a book. So I put one book up, they can enroll in the contest. People who go to the news, I mean, anybody can enroll in the contest if they go to my website, but people who get the newsletter get a direct link into the contest. So I run a contest every month and I give a book away every month. Just things like that that I put in the newsletter on a regular basis. Yes. Pantser, right by the seat of your pants. So suggestions for switching genres, if you decide that this is what you want to do. Know why you want to switch. So there should be a reason. It shouldn't just be, I don't know. I mean, I can't think of a bad reason. I mean, even if you wanted to switch because I know that this, you know, is a bigger seller, I don't think that's a bad reason. I don't think it's wrong to earn money at what you do. A lot of times I think people think like we just write because we love to write. I do write because I love to write, but I also like, you know, the royalty check. It's nice. Set a goal for yourself. So what are you going to write? When are you going to write it? How often are you going to publish it? Is it going to be a series or is it going to be a one-off? Either are fine. Just set that goal, have that goal in mind. I have, if you're going to switch genres, I would recommend creating a book calendar. So I have a book calendar and I know exactly which series needs the newest update. And so I keep track of that for myself. I usually have the whole series plotted out. So I know exactly how many books are in the series, when it's going to end, and what the next title is. I even have the title and I usually have the cover already kind of decided before I go forward. I'm not telling you you have to be quite that anal, but I think at least having a book calendar, knowing kind of when are you going to roughly publish, how many times do you think you're going to publish a year or not? I mean, if it, you know, it's 2 years, whatever, that I think that's fine. But I think having that calendar and kind of keeping track of what you're going to be doing is not a bad idea. I can, yeah. So be careful about using different pen names. This one's really important to me because a lot of people will do that. If you think about Nora Roberts, when she wanted to write her thrillers, she went by J.D. Robb. Nobody was fooled. So why did you do that? You had an audience already built by Nora Roberts. Nobody was tricked by going to J.D. Robb. So I think be careful. If you really decide you're going to write erotica, you might want a pen name. But if you're not, why are you switching? Why are you getting a pen name? And if you've built an audience with your first pen name, why would you abandon that and try and recreate the wheel again? Which I know a lot of authors feel like they have to do. And certainly if that's what you choose to do, I think that's fine, except for do understand people will read multiple different types of novels, you know, so you don't necessarily have to do that. Be very clear about why you're switching pen names if that's what you choose to do. And the other thing I would recommend, no matter what you write, read in that genre. Make sure you know what sort of the features are. That's why I kind of gave you the features of the two. Make sure you know what the features of each genre is so that, you know, people, they have a level of expectation when they pick up a murder mystery book. That's what they're kind of expecting to see. There's certain tropes in that they're expecting to see. I'm not saying follow the tropes necessarily, but there's a reason why we have genres because they fit those requirements. Final thoughts for you. I think it's always good to make sure you enjoy reading the genre that you're writing in. just because it will make you more enthusiastic about writing in that genre. I would suggest you join a critique group of people who write in that new genre. I cannot emphasize enough, the best thing I ever did was kind of get out of my head and let other people read my work. It was hard. It was terrifying. And I'm not going to lie, there were many, many tears shed often. And yet it made me a better writer. And I'm going to tell you honestly, there were times where I didn't receive the criticism in the best way that I should have. I'm much better now than I used to be. And so even if you feel like I'm not there yet, I don't feel like I can do that. Force yourself to do it because you get better at it. It gets to be less personal. And the thing is that what you have to remember is the minute that your book goes out into the world, it's not your baby anymore. It's everybody else's experience. I have people all the time write back to me and say, you know, I think that so-and-so wouldn't have acted that way. And at first I would get like, who are you to tell me how my character would act? But it's their experience. And so you have to be respectful of that and understand that once it leaves you and it goes out in the world, it becomes a different animal and it's not your baby anymore. And so joining that critique group will kind of get you over that because it's really hard to get a 1-star review and feel like somebody didn't like your work, right? But you're gonna have to get over that because it's gonna happen. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. If you look at any famous writer, they have a host of 1-star reviews, right? And they could be Nobel Prize winners, they could be Pulitzer Prize winners, and they still have 1-star reviews. So joining a critique group is one way in a safe environment to get over that.
What?
To get over feeling protective about your work and feeling defensive about it. And then this brings me to editors. Find an editor who specializes in your new genre. I found another, this is another resource you might want to write down. It's called K Boards. So K like Kindle Boards, and it's Writers Cafe. And if you go on there, they have a bunch of writers, just it's a forum for writers. And they bring up, if I ever hear anything weird, I go there to see kind of what they're talking about. But you can also find cover designers there. You can find editors there. I found my editor there. And yeah, it's K like kite, boards. Yes, BOARDS, and it's the Writers Cafe. You want Writers Cafe. And it's a great resource. You can find a bunch of stuff through them. That's where I found my editor. And she's in Canada. And that really worked for me because I don't have to, I send it to her. She does her stuff. She sends it back to me. If I have questions, I can ask her. But it's just all, very seamless. If you need, I know that there's a lot of editors locally that will do your work if you want somebody you can kind of meet with on one-on-one, and that's not a bad thing either. So you might look, I don't know whether you guys have a list of editors or people in yours, but I know NCPA has a list of people who do editing too. So ask around, ask other people who they have to edit, but I would strongly recommend joining a critique group and then finding an independent editor. Yes. They usually will do a sample edit for you. So usually you send them something and they'll do a sample edit to kind of see if you like what they do. The one that I found, she was highly recommended on the Writers Cafe. So I contacted her and then we got to working again. She's been my editor for probably the last 3 years.
Is she
I believe so.
is she
Yeah.
oh
Is one of the forums under there. Yeah. It used to be Kindle, and then Amazon threw a fit about it, so they had to drop it to K Boards. Be patient if you haven't already learned this, but being a writer is playing the long game. Don't expect instant results. Gloria was so nice just to kind of give you my statistics. I've been extraordinarily lucky, and I really call it luck because I seem to have kind of hit a niche and plowed my way through it. But it's been 12 years you know, and so the first year I was writing, I thought, well, if I don't turn a, so I gave myself, so I set a goal. So when I talk about setting goals, this is why it's important. I set a 5-year goal. So I started in 2010 and I said by 2015, if I'm not turning a profit, and I literally mean $1 over what I'm spending on this thing, I'm going to stop. But I gave it 5 years. I started turning a profit in year 2. So I would set the goal, be realistic about it, and understand that it's playing the long game, right? It's playing the long ball. You're not, it's not gonna, I mean, the number of people that hit overnight, my hat's off to them, but that's few and far between, right? It's not the bulk of us, but you can make a very, very good living by being a mid-level author, which is kind of where I'm at. So you can make a very decent living by hitting that mid-level and staying there. Thank you.
You're a good writer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I do feel very lucky. Oh, so yeah, my 5-year rule. I forget I have these things down there.
Mhm.
Let me give you my contact information, because if you have any questions, I do want you to be able to contact me. This is my website. This is my email. And I have my PO box.
Where is it?
If you're
Oh.
into, you know, snail mail, please feel free to email or send me mail if you want to. But if you have any questions, please do contact me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have. And I'd like to kind of open it up now for questions if anybody has them. Yes,
Yes.
yes.
What was the reason? You can't really tell. Yeah.
That's exactly what it was. So first of all, when I started being in epic fantasy, if you think back 12 years ago, there weren't a lot of women writing epic fantasy. It just wasn't. I mean, J.K. Rowling kind of broke the glass ceiling for us, but there weren't a lot of women. And this is the whole reason why she went by J.K. Rowling too. There weren't just a lot of women, and I was coming into a publisher that was all male. Now they've added women to their staff, but the publisher was completely male at the time. And so I thought it would be best to go with my initials to kind of hide my gender, because I was under the impression that men wouldn't read a female writer. I've learned that that's wrong. Men will. But the other reason why is I stupidly thought if I went by my initials that my students wouldn't find out about it. Which they found out immediately. I swear if the CIA or the FBI were smart, they'd hire teenagers to work for them, because we'd never have any secrets. Yeah, I am. So I am very active on Twitter. I do have Instagram. I'm not really good at Instagram. I struggle with Instagram because you have to post it all from your phone, and I'd rather do it from the computer. I'm older, so I'd rather do things from the computer, and you can't post to Instagram you have to do it from your phone. And then Facebook, I do advertising on Facebook, and the one I'm toying with trying to break into, I don't know if you guys have heard, but Book Talk on TikTok is launched writers into the stratosphere.
Really?
Yeah, and so it's called Book Talk, and so it's BOOKTOK and it's on TikTok. So a couple weekends ago, I happened to be down at my son's. He lives in San Francisco, and he lives in this apartment complex, and we go up to the roof garden, and you can see all of the whole city just spread out. I mean, just this gorgeous view of the city. So I said, okay. I said, I think I need to be on TikTok. So my son says, oh my gosh, Mom, this is another midlife crisis, isn't it? And he said, you know, we had I wrote a screenplay, and we took it to a movie, and we made a short movie out of it. And he helped me do that. And so then when I come to him with TikTok, he's like, oh my God, Mom, this is the next midlife crisis you've got. We were going to be a movie maker, and now we're going to be a TikTok star. So we did all this filming. We filmed on his roof garden, and then we went around the city. We went out, one of the books is set in the Presidio, so we went and we filmed in the Presidio, and I prostituted my poor little puppy and made her come and show, because, you know, people love puppies. And then we went to the Palace of Fine Arts, which is one of my favorite places in the city, and we filmed some there. And then, you know, I was going to put together this video for TikTok, and I still haven't done it yet. I've got to do it because I'd like to see. So that's my next venture, is to try and see if I can break into book talk on TikTok. I don't know whether I will. That's not really my comfort zone, but
May
Yeah.
I ask you?
no,
May may
no
I ask,
dancing. Any
may
other
I ask you
questions?
about the use of a pen name?
Yeah.
How many books do you write per year?
So I try and do one, I do one in the Peyton Brooks mysteries. I do one in my Cozy Mysteries. And then I've gotten into doing this Christmas mystery, which is just a novella. But so I try and get at least 4 full-length
Wow.
novels and then 1 novella a year.
A lot.
One crazy year, I am really close with my audiobook producer. And so she kind of keeps me, you know, focused on what I should be writing on, because otherwise I'd be all over the place. That's why I make a list. I make a list for everything, because otherwise I'd be flitting everywhere. So one year I get this idea, I'm going to write 1 novel a month, a novella a month. And I'm going to title them by the days of the months, right? So it's going to be January, February, and I'm going to write 1 a month. And I'm going to turn it out at the beginning of the month. So I have to have it done the month previous. And it's all going to be about 12 women. This was during the Me Too movement. I thought I'm going to do about 12 women. And they're all going to be connected by one of the women who had breast cancer and died. And so it's all going to be their stories based on this one woman. And they're kind of in the periphery around her, you know, dying, and kind of what happens to their lives as a result of her dying. And so I started, and I'm super excited. I told her, I said, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to just write this year. It's going to be a year of discovery. That's what I'm going to call it. It's a year of discovery. And I'm going to write 1 novel per month, and I'm going to get that turned out. And she's like, okay, you say so. So I let my readers know this is what I'm doing. I'm going to take a break from all the rest of the series, and then I'm going to do this. And I did it, and I made it, and it almost killed me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But I did it, and I'll never do that again. So unfortunately, I do this. I'll take these detours and I'll suddenly pop off on something else. And she's always telling me, you know, we need to stay focused.
May I ask you about the use of a pen
What
name?
is your word count?
As you can see,
So I don't really do word counts, but so I always do, I think, page numbers for some reason. So a novel to me is about 350 pages. And then the novella is about 150 pages at the outside. Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had an answer for that. You know, I don't know. It's just always, writing is therapy for me. So whenever anything's going on in my life, you know, to be able to go in and kind of shut myself. Oh, that is one thing I will tell you. So anyway, to kind of back up, writing to me is when I was going through my divorce, I spent hours just writing, and it wasn't really about the divorce. It was just writing, you know, fantasy, because I needed escape. It's, you know, I got to get out of my head. I got to get away from this. And so I've always used writing as kind of the therapy. So I've always written, but one thing I will tell you, what happened and was the best thing I ever did, is I created a writer's nook for myself. I actually am lucky enough to have an office, but it's just my writing stuff in there. And of course the dogs and the cat come in there, but nothing else. And so I set myself off. I have, I can play some classical music, so I can kind of zone out, but it has to be away from wherever anything, like if there's a toilet to clean, I got to shut the door, because, you know, I want to just stay in that. And so I would recommend, if you really are serious about your writing, you need to have a designated spot to do it in. It doesn't have to be an office. It could just be a corner of some room, but it needs to be your place and away from where everybody else is going to be trafficking.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay.
Something related. Writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Teaching is getting in the way of my life. Yeah. It's really hard. When I have breaks from teaching, I love to write in the morning. I feel I'm fresher in the morning. So what I'll usually do is get up, feed the dogs, take them for a walk, sit down and write. And that I can get quite a bit turned out by doing that. With teaching, unfortunately, I can't do that in the morning. So I literally write at lunch, like every stolen moment I write. So once that bell rings, I shut the door, tell the kids I'm off the clock, and I write until the bell rings again.
Mhm.
And then I come home and I write. I don't do a lot of TV watching just because there's just not enough time. I've never been a big TV watcher anyway. So it's pretty much whenever I can fit it in. I do notice that when I'm feeling creative, I do it better in the early morning. And then by the time in the evening, I'll spend that usually editing because I'm kind of grumpy and I can be more critical of myself, so I like to kind of reserve my editing for in the evening. And I would separate those two. That's a really important thing. I would separate those two because the problem with editing while you're trying to create is you're going to be self-editing and you're going to be cutting things out and you just need to create. Then go back after it's sat. And I always recommend let it sit for 1 to 2 days before you go back and reread it again. So I've always written in third person. That's such a good question. I've always written in third person point of view because writing epic fantasy kind of lends itself to that. And then I thought, never tried writing in first person. And I started a book. It happened to be an urban fantasy. I started it and I was struggling with it. I couldn't feel the character. I couldn't get a feel for who the character was. I couldn't get a feel for the story. And I hated everything that I had written. And I was writing in third person. And so I went back and I thought, I'm just going to try first person. I'm just going to try it. And all of a sudden it's like everything opened up. And I wrote the whole book in first person. So I'm venturing more into first person, but I typically tend to write in third person more. I do like to kind of, I don't head hop. That means when you write, you jump from one head to the next. But I will do one chapter in one character's point of view and another chapter in another character's point of view. So I kind of like to not be limited, which first person can be limiting, except for sometimes a book just needs to be in first person. So I would recommend if you're struggling and you're feeling like it's just not flowing, flip the point of view. Try that and it might open things up. You might see it just washes away the log jam. Right.
Who's writing?
Oh, I can tell you. My favorite novel is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I teach it every year and every year I read it again. And I find something new no matter how old I am. I find something new every year I read it. So I love her stuff. Zora Neale Hurston. She wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God.
Oh, okay.
My favorite novel. But I can find inspiration in so many places. We're reading Of Mice and Men with my students right now, and I can see things in that. So it just depends. But to me, for beauty of prose and everything, it would have to be Their Eyes Were Watching God.
Okay, this, amazing language.
Yeah, so if you go to the news, to the website, it's the first link there. When it comes up, you'll see it will have a pop-up that will come up and you can sign up for my newsletter. And the first time you come on there, it should pop up and you should be able to see my newsletter. And then please do take a look at my website. I do have it broken out into the different series. And then enter the contest. And yeah. Is there any other questions, Bernard? And
Public relations is way too much. There's someone you should hire to help us read understand the contract.
yeah.
How do you recommend? Watch out for.
Yeah, those are all really good questions. No, I unwittingly sold away my world because I didn't understand the contract. And I didn't understand the term right of first refusal. So I would recommend if anyone is going the traditional publishing route, make sure you do know what everything in that contract says. If it says anything about right of first refusal, I think I would walk away. And it also, you have to look and make sure that they're just buying the book. You just want them to buy the book, not anything else that you're doing. So you want to make sure, I'd be very careful unless they're going to offer you, say, a 3-book deal and they're going to put that in writing. I would be very careful about even giving them option on the next book in the series. I would do it book by book and be very careful about that. There are contract lawyers. Unfortunately, it's just, finding one
And they cost
and being able to afford it is the other problem. What was-
If you had a last name like mine, would you use a pen name?
That's,
What? But,
yeah. So when I finish a book, it goes to two people. First of all, it goes, my parents kind of function as my first beta readers. It goes to them, and then it goes to my audiobook producer. And she's pretty amazing at catching stuff. And then it goes to, after I kind of get feedback from both of those sources, it goes to my editor. And so once I get it back from the editor, I make all the changes. I give the new copy to the audiobook producer. She begins producing the audiobook. And then I go forward. Usually the cover is usually already done. So then I usually do a pre-sale. You can do a pre-sale on Amazon. And I put it up for pre-sale usually a month before it's ready to come out, because we always are trying to get the audiobook. Takes between 14 to 15 days for it just to go through a quality assurance once it's finished through ACX, if that's who you're going through. So we're always trying to get the audiobook to release as close to when we release the print and the ebook. That's our goal. And so I usually do a pre-sale because that buys us some time for the audiobook to go through that pre-production vetting that it has to go through in ACX. So then I will set the pre-sale. I'll usually send, usually about 3 months before the book comes out, I start advertising it on my newsletters. And I'll send, once it goes live for the pre-sale, I'll send a newsletter out at the start of that month to let them know that the book is going to be released on what day. And I usually have the date picked already. And so the newsletter will go out, they can start purchasing it. And the good thing about doing the pre-sale is what it does is it brings so Amazon's all about algorithms, right? So if you have the pre-sale, it brings your ranking down on Amazon by how many pre-sales. And so if you hit within a certain level, I think it's between 20 and 30,000 on Amazon, they'll start advertising for you. So what you want to do is you want to bring that pre-sale down. And it triggers a couple of things. It starts the advertising right away. through Amazon on the pre-sale. And then it starts, ACX or Audible, they're kind of the same in a way. They will expedite your audiobook if you have lower ranking already on the book. So then that will expedite that coming out sooner. And so once you come in, once it goes live, then you have it already ranking, you have it already where Amazon's doing some of the advertising for you. And you get a 30-day window from the time your book goes live on Amazon. I don't know if you're aware of this, where Amazon will promote your book. So you've got that 30-day hotspot from the actual release until they stop promoting you. And so by getting your ranking down, you kick into a different level of promotion. That was a lot, but hope that made sense. Did that answer your question? Oh, no, that's a great name. That's a great, no, I would use that. And Adele too is a great, I mean, you got it going, both names are got name recognition. No, that would be great. That's awesome.
It's really my name.
Any others? Yeah.
Or how do you know? Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, you'll never be satisfied. It's not gonna happen. Yeah, no, there's always, yeah, no matter what. There's always gonna be like, oh, I should have written that different, or I should have done that. So at some point, yeah, at some point you have to set a publication date. Just set your publication, if it's arbitrary or not, pick a date, set it, and meet that date, because you've got to get it out. Otherwise, you'll never do it, because it's never going to feel right. It's never going to feel perfect to you. Well, it was such a pleasure to come talk to you guys today, and I'm glad we got everything worked out. And thank you, everybody online. I hope I didn't miss any of your questions, but if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me and let me know. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, well, thanks for watching. I'll be in touch. Oh. I just asked Michelle if we can share the slides, and she says yes. So we'll get them to everybody who's online who missed it. Again, technical issues.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, it was good.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Stuff roll on the website. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna
Thanks a
close
lot,
down now.
Bernard. Good.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks.
Very nice.